Hello, guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Crooked Illness. Today, we are going to be getting into what emotional detoxing is all about. I have a special guest joining me today to get into the focus of today's episode, which is actually inspired by her book, Emotional Detox 7 Steps to Release Toxicity and Energize Joy. My guest is Sherianna Boyle. She is an author of 9 books, professional speaker, adjunct professor of psychology, founder of Emotional Detox Coaching, and cleanselife.com. I'm excited to have her here today to chat with me about her story as it relates to today's topic, along with the work she has done and is currently doing. So without further ado, welcome Sherianna to the podcast.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm sorry, my mic went out for a second.
Oh, I was like, I see her. She's there. But the mic, okay, you are all good. Yes. Oh my gosh, this is so funny. Well, yeah, I'm so glad to have you here today and that we got to set this up to dive into this topic. I'm super excited. After we spoke last time before recording this, there was so many good tips that you dropped on me that I'm excited to dive into today. So before we go ahead and get into that, I would love if you could give me a nice overview of your story and how it led you to the discovery of emotional detoxing.
Sure. So, Emotional Detox is actually my 7th book. And I always say I could have never written that book had I not written 6 others before it. I feel like the 6 others all played a little role in creating that book. And maybe even that was their purpose, was to get me to that point where I could create Emotional Detox. And so the book before that was called, well, there were a couple books. One was The 4 Gifts of Anxiety, and that's all about transforming energy and anxiety and how our anxiety is not the issue. It's really the fact that we don't understand how to work with it. And you actually can transform symptoms such as fear or uncertainty or doubt into something new. That was The 4 Gifts of Anxiety. Once I wrote that, and then I had sort of an understanding of, okay, what we could do with emotions, that eventually led me to a book called Mantras Made Easy. In that book, I had a solid mantra practice. So I had probably 3 of them when I was writing that book. And one of the practices was about my marriage. I was doing a mantra, and mantras, if you really understand what they're about, they're a spiritual practice that you commit to for about 90 days, and you say it 180 times in a row. So that's the difference
Wow.
between a mantra and an
So do
affirmation.
you say it
Yeah.
180 times in a row each day?
Yes.
Or,
Each
oh,
day.
okay.
Yeah. So that's what Mantras Made Easy has. And so I was reciting a mantra is a phrase, a word, or it can be a syllable, it can be a sound. And I had a whole verse going on regarding my marriage. And I did that for 90 days. I published Mantras Made Easy. And then I had this idea about emotional detox. And I thought, where's that coming from? Because I really wasn't planning on writing another book, but I thought, emotional detox. So I started researching emotions and this and that and learning more about them. And I presented it to my publisher, Simon and Schuster. And they were like, this is great, but you need to do more work. And I thought, okay, I just worked so hard. And so I went back, did more work, and presented it again. They said, okay, now you've got it. You've got something, you have something solid. So we were moving forward. I was ready to write Emotional Detox. And then, I don't know, it was probably 5 weeks later, I was hit with the worst news of my life, the most traumatic news of my life, which it would impact every area of my life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. It impacted every single relationship in my life. I really got a doozy. So now I think to myself, I can't write this book. I'm a mess. I'm in crisis, and so are my children. So I go back to the publisher and I can't write this book. And they said, we're great. And they said, when you can, you pick it up again. And I thought for sure, oh God, I don't know if I'll ever be able to write again. I'm probably going to have to get a new job. Literally, that's what I thought. I'm probably going to have to go back and have to get a few jobs, actually.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah.
What was the event that took place when you were working on or trying to start working on this book?
So it's written in emotional detox. So there's two emotional detox books. There's the core book, which is the white cover, colorful cover. That talks about my story. And the story was the day that I found out my husband was having an affair.
Mm.
So so that was my story. And so I wrote about that in that book. It's loosely talked about in a way where really people can understand. I think that's why the book is actually doing so well, is because everybody can relate to betrayal in some way. And everybody wants to understand how to get through something like that. So that was what had happened. And then eventually I would go on and I would write Emotional Detox for Anxiety, mainly because I had created a framework in emotional detox called CLEANSE. It's an acronym, it's the 7 steps of an emotional detox. And when I say I created it, as you know now, I didn't just write about research. I had to go through it myself, which was a blessing because I got to try it out. I got to throw some things out, try them again. I wrestled with that material so much, which was exactly what needed to happen because I needed to see it, not just from my experience, but what people who have been through trauma have gone through. And the reality is, Paris, we've all been through trauma.
Yes.
We all
I
have.
agree with you 100%
Yeah.
on that. And I honestly, the thing that I love the most about this is that in your writing, you were writing about something that you experienced, and then that turned into the other book. So you have the emotional detox, and that's so wild to me that you have 9 books that you published, and that's such a huge accomplishment. And being able to really write about all these topics and things that you actually live through, and you're telling your story, and you're putting that down on paper for people to be able to read and relate to and resonate with. And like you said, everybody has experienced some form of trauma, some form of loss, betrayal, grief, whatever that emotion is. Everyone has had some kind of an experience like that in their lives. So it's very, very relatable and so important that you did that you told your story, because I know sometimes it can be very challenging at first to do that and put that down, especially to publish a book about that and to do that. So I think that's awesome that you did that. And also, what is the cleanse method? What does that stand for?
So the cleanse are the 7 steps of an emotional detox, 7 mindful steps. And the reason I came up with it, I had no idea I would have a cleanse method, steps, any of that. That was never on my mind. But when I was going through the emotional detox, one of the things I learned that when you're in trauma or crisis, and people, I believe people that are really overextended and overworked, it can almost feel a little bit like the same feeling as trauma. You get very numb and you feel like all it takes is one more thing and you're going to break, right? You're just one hair away from one step away of saying of giving up, really. That's what it feels like. And so what happens is you lose your memory. That's what I found. It's kind of like being pregnant or post pregnancy. You just get this foggy brain. You can't remember anything. And I thought to myself, whatever it is I create, it has to be an acronym because I can't even think straight. And I was,
Wow. So
yeah,
you're saying you lost your memory during that time of coming up with the method, or was that a
during
different?
my crisis, one of the
Oh,
things I
okay.
recognized, so I'm playing with how this is going to work because I'm in it. One of the things I'm realizing is to just tell people to read a book and go back to it and do this and that. I needed a system that they could rely on because for me during that time frame, like going to yoga or going for a walk, it just wasn't going to cut it. not for the level of what I was in. And I realize now that I'm out and help other people, a lot of people feel that way. Like they're like, I do those things, but it doesn't seem, it works for a little while, but it doesn't really seem to shift things in a way that they hope for. So that's how the cleanse came to be, the steps. The first step is C, which is clear reactivity, which is about centering and balancing your body. And I give all sorts of tools and techniques for that. The second step is L, which is look inward. And that's where we're starting to acknowledge the emotions, what's happening, and giving them space to exist. And then the third step is called emit, which is an E, which is a mantra. And that's why I always tell my mantra story first, because I want people to know that I really knew there was going to be a mantra in there after I had done those sacred practices. Now, mind you, I was mantraing about my marriage, right? And look what happens. Now, what I didn't tell you is one of my mantras, I was asking for the truth.
Wow. Wow. That's powerful right there. You were asking for
My
the truth. And
mantra,
then that's what happened. That's pretty
yeah,
crazy right there.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. About 2 months later, I got the truth. And I really believe it helped uncover it because it was so, it's so easy to have an affair now. It's so easy to hide. It's very scary for people because it's really not very hard to hide something.
And I think that's
Um,
very brave of you to want to ask for the truth, because
mm,
sometimes people, when they're in that situation, they might always not want to know the truth, or if they have a suspicion or idea of that, they might just want to push it off and not want to deal with it or hear about it or face that. But you were actually asking for that, and you wanted that to be revealed. You wanted to have that come into light for you, and that's really what happened. And I think that's pretty awesome to be that way, because sometimes we get caught up in really not wanting to know or not wanting to deal with it, but we still stay where we are even if we aren't happy there or we aren't
mm,
doing well there. We just choose to remain there because it's unknown where we'll go from there. If we move, what we don't know what could happen, like not knowing what will result if we take action on the truth that you discover. What's going to happen next?
yeah. And I was there. I mean, I was in denial. It's called denial.
Yes, yes.
And I've had my share of that as well. So I know what it's like to be in that space of not wanting to know. I mean, a woman knows, right? We know. A man knows. We have intuition. We have instinct. We have a feeling. You pick up on little things here and there. There's no doubt in my mind that I did know already. I already knew the truth. I actually didn't need a mantra to tell me the truth. I think it was just what the mantra did was it prepared me for the truth, and it led me to the next thing after that, which would help me heal and transform myself and my marriage. So, so I really believe in them. They're incredibly helpful ancient tools that can support us, and it would lead me to the cleanse. It would change my life, and
Yeah, well,
now,
you just taught me something new right there, because mantras, I always would have assumed that they're similar to affirmations. I would have assumed that, but it
yeah,
seems like they're different. They're not like
yeah.
that.
It's interesting because some people look at that book and oh, there we go. Yeah, my mic goes out now and then,
Yeah.
or my
So
back.
you
Okay.
were saying people look at
Yeah.
that book, the mantras, and because I was saying, I
Some,
didn't really
yeah,
fully understand,
yeah,
the difference. Like what is the difference between mantras and affirmations? And I feel like you really clarified that for me, because I always thought, an affirmation is a statement, right? You repeat or you say it maybe once or a few
yeah.
times, but you're saying for
Mhm.
mantras, you do that for 9 months, I think you said 9 months, and you repeat it
No,
100. No,
90
I got
days. 90
90 days.
days.
Why did I say 9 months? Okay,
90 days.
90 days, 90 days, and you
Yeah.
were yeah. I'm like
Yeah.
thinking of
Yeah.
I'm like pregnancy. She said pregnancy nine
Yeah.
months. No, like no, mantra is
Yeah.
90 days, and you say you
Yeah.
repeat that 180 times. But I wanted to ask you this. So I think you might have already brought this up a little bit, but for you, what was the most helpful thing in overcoming your experience with that trauma that you went
Mm.
through?
I think I think the probably learning how to feel a feeling. I didn't know how to do that. Even though I'd been teaching yoga. I mean, I've been teaching yoga for 19 years. I've written about mindfulness. I knew what transforming a feeling was because I had written The Four Gifts of Anxiety, which has all these healing tools in it. So I knew how to do that, but I really realized that I wrote it from a perspective of how to help other people. Where emotional detox was different was I was really in it. I was entrenched. I was feeling it. I was testing it not just from the lens of does this help or not. I was feeling it in my body and noticing. I would also notice when I wasn't feeling. And so I think the biggest thing that I learned was even in the healing modalities, and I'm trained in all sorts of healing stuff. I've got certifications up the wazoo. But I'm going to be honest with you, Paris. Some of them taught me fear. Sometimes you go into the healing world and it's so focused on get rid of this and remove that and release this and change this and don't let this in and protect yourself from this. And I realized even though I was in this healing world, I was still in fear. And
Mm.
it wasn't until I started to really do the cleanse that I realized I don't need all that stuff. I don't need to put white light around me. I don't need to wear a million crystals. I, not that I don't love them, and I do love them. I have too many crystals. I have a lot of crystals, but I don't even have them on right now. But I used to be like the crystal lady. Like you'd look at me and go, "Oh my God," and they're gorgeous to look at and feel.
Yeah.
But
Aw.
I don't but I would wear them because I was afraid. I was afraid because I was such an empath, right? And you hear that a lot too, where you feel everything and I felt so fragile. And what I realize is when you process your emotions, what you do is you get strong and you get protective. And I really don't what's fascinating to me is how much emotional processing helps you to just feel pure love all the time. With everything that's going on in the world, I have a really hard time relating to anything that's fear-based, anger-based. I just feel pure love for all of it. And I'm like,
I
am I crazy? I actually feel crazy that
I
I feel love.
I love that you bring up the most helpful thing for you is actually feeling your feelings and going through that, because especially how you bring up helping other people through that, right, through the different books you've written with these processes and modalities and tips and all these things that you're putting out there to help other people, but kind of when you were experiencing that, not being able to help yourself because you're not feeling what's happening, what's going on. And I think that's so important because there's probably so many people out there who are the same, who have been there, who are there right now, who are in a situation where they don't want to feel what's going on and really be there and be in the moment. And I think that's so important that you bring that up, of especially in one of your books, one of the 9 books you've written where it is your story. You talk about what happened with your life, finding out that your husband is having an affair and being deeply, deeply affected by this, and writing that and being in that moment. And then having this other book that you were wanting to start working on, and you got the green light from the publisher, and you were going to start doing this, and then just feeling like you can't write anymore, you can't do this anymore, feeling like that. But I think that's the key right there, is just really being in that moment and feeling that, even though it's not fun. It's not like it's
Mhm.
not fun to feel these things that are not happy or positive that are going on, but really doing that, like you said, you begin to form a level of strength in resiliency and being able to come back from situations like this. And then you also learn so much from that. You know, I feel like you've probably learned so much from your experience, so much from, and that like everybody else has in the world who maybe has gone through something similar, you know, learning a lesson or, you know, whatever it is from that moment that was not a good time, that was challenging, very difficult, but being able to take something away from that and use it to help you move forward, right? And help yourself, because, you know, especially someone like you who's so used to helping others and teaching others and doing these kinds of things, but not doing that for you, but then really being able to do that and noticing the difference it's had in your life and the impact that you feel when you get up in the morning, the differences you're noticing and how you are feeling and doing since you've been able to do that. Because I think that's a really, it's not always an easy thing to do. It's not always an easy thing to, I think, feel your feelings when they're not good, or when you're especially going through something that is very difficult and challenging. It's not always easy to do that.
No, it's definitely not. So I can empathize with people that are feeling like I don't have time for that. I've got, and that's the way I felt too, was I had so many things I was juggling and I was always writing something, these huge projects on my plate. I have 3 daughters and
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh, wow.
yeah. So I'm, juggling and helping them and being a mom and then having my own private practice. And I also teach psychology. I'm at a college. So I have a full plate and I've always had a full plate, and people can relate because it's like you think I don't have time for that. And if I address it or I feel it, somehow I'm going to lose my footing in the world. I'm not going to be able to move forward. I'm not going to get where I want to be. And so I totally get why people would avoid it. But now that I'm on the other side, I gained my footing. I never had my footing. That was all an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
I was just, I was reacting. And that's what I talk about in emotional detox is I was managing what I was feeling by keeping myself incredibly busy and running, occupied and focused on my kids and their stuff and what's going on for them. And there was no room for feeling. And what I've learned since then is that is incredibly disrespectful to yourself. And think of it like if you had a friend and you just kept saying, I'm busy, I'm busy. Oh, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm busy. I know you're there and I know you want to get together, but I can't do that. And you just kept putting him off and putting him off. Eventually that friend would just feel so hurt. That's what we do to ourselves. I know you're there. I know you're there, emotions, but I really don't have time for you. And it's disrespectful. And you will gain your footing and then some by allowing yourself to feel.
Wow, I love that analogy you just put together right there, because I think that's, I always love those. Like I always love when
Mhm.
people, you know, give me examples like that, especially, you know, with the one you just did of, you know, having a friend and they're wanting to see you and you're like, you know, later, later, not right now, and just, you know, noticing that we do that to our own selves when it comes to our feelings and processing that and feeling them and dealing with them. We say no, later, no, you know, I know this is here, you know it's present, it's going on, but you'll get to it later another time. And I think that's so powerful that you bring that up, because it is something that happens a lot with probably a lot of people in a lot of different circumstances. But the one thing I also want to ask you, similar to this, is I always love to ask people this question. So, do you think there is a relationship between mindset and mental health? And if so, what does the significance of that relationship look like for you?
I do. It depends on the mindset, though.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? I feel like that's what emotional detox, that was the first thing I had to do. So I went on more the traditional stuff. So after I found out, I thought, well, I didn't have a therapist or anything. Like I said, I'm the therapist for everybody else. So I didn't have any of those things in place. So I got a therapist, and then I went to that, and I thought, this just doesn't feel right. So then I got another therapist, and that one didn't feel right. I was a terrible client, patient, whatever you want to call me. I was awful because I had all this stuff in my mind that I had learned about emotions. And I couldn't not think about it. Think about, okay, you're telling me to do this, but the research is showing me this. So what do I do? Do I do what you tell me to do, or do I listen to what I just learned? And then from that, what I realized is I needed to create a mindset. And so emotional detox is based on the mindset that all emotions are good so long as you process them.
I
All
love that.
emotions.
I love
And
that. I
that
think
that
that's
was my
so
motto.
important.
Yeah,
The way you just lay that out. They're all good as long as you
process
process
them.
them.
Yeah.
And yeah, because, I always love to ask people this question to see what they think or what they say, whether it's related to you specifically or just in general, if you think there's a relationship there between mindset or the way, we're currently thinking right now or whatever's happening right now in this moment that we're experiencing,
Mm,
dealing with, going through, that could potentially alter the way that we think and can make it, more negative and harder to process those emotions,
mm,
and how that can end up affecting our mental health, right? So
mm,
if we're, if you say like, look at how I was a year ago compared to
mm,
today, and when I was really struggling with, anxiety or different things that I was dealing with at the time, what was my mindset like? And I
mm,
always like to ask people, like, what was your mindset like
mm,
in the lowest moment that you've ever been in, and what did you see from that? Like, what was it? What kind of thought process did you have, about yourself, about others, about the world, and how is that different? Or what did you do to change that, to come out of that place? I always love to
mm,
see, what people think about that, because everybody has, their own unique experiences. And I always think it's so cool to see, what people say about that. If I was
mm,
here, this is what it was like for me. This is the way that I thought and acted. And this is really what it was. And this is the steps that I took to come out of that place because I wasn't happy there.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, that one of the shifts that I needed to shift for myself and eventually an emotional detox is I really believe that there's only one emotion, and that's love.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't I think this is why therapy was a little hard for me at first. And I'm a huge fan of therapy. And I have a lot of social workers, therapists, coaches that will come to me, and they'll use my cleanse maybe in the beginning of their sessions with people, the steps of an emotional detox, and then they'll do their whatever they're trained in. So I'm a huge fan. But for me, I had to develop the mindset that the only emotion is love. Everything else is a reaction. And what that did was it helped me get more grounded and clear. Because if you try to figure out every single emotion and every thought and why are you feeling this and this leads to that, you just really make yourself crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I just knew if I was maybe thinking a lot, or if my body was having a physical reaction, meaning accelerated heart rate, tightness, if I was really crying a lot, things like that, that I had to tell myself, you're in reactivity. It's okay. um, and you just need to cleanse it, right? We're just going to cleanse this.
Yes.
And sometimes cleansing is a lot. Sometimes there were days I just cleanse, cleanse, cleanse. But now there's a lot of space between those times. I do cleanse every day as kind of like a baseline, because what I learned was, even though I had dabbled in so many different things over the years, and so many people do that. They'll go to workshop here, class here, book club, whatever it is. What I learned is those things do count. They do,
Yes.
because life happens, you know, can't control what happens. And you, when you do take care of yourself on some level, even if you're telling yourself, oh, well, I only do this or I only do that, it will count
Yes,
because,
I think that is so
yeah.
so true because like you said, I think the biggest thing I took away from this right here, this last question we were on is clarity and awareness because you
Mm,
brought up the awareness of when you're reacting and knowing, if you're crying and not having a good day or whatever is going on,
mm,
knowing
mhm,
that and having an awareness of this is what I am in right now. I'm reacting to
yeah.
this, and I feel like that is what helps so much with gaining clarity. Like you said, identifying everything goes back to love. And that helps so much because, like you said, of course, when you're trying to work through all these different things, like you could have sadness, you could have anger, you could have,
Mm,
reactivity, you could have happiness over here, you could have these all fear, all kinds of
mm,
shame, embarrassment, guilt, whatever these emotions are, and then trying to deal with all of them and process all of them can feel very overwhelming. So I like how you make it simple and you
mm,
break it down and you have the cleanse method that is very easy to follow. It's very
mm,
clearly defined, and it makes it easy for people instead of having to say, okay, well, now I have to, and just letting that overwhelm you of, oh, how am I going to deal with all this? And then there's
mm,
that.
mm,
But I really like how you break it down and bringing up that piece of awareness and then clarity and how that allows us to gain clarity of what's going on overall instead of trying to figure out all these tiny pieces and where
mm,
do they go? Where does this fit? Why is this like this? And just because I feel like it's almost easier to get caught up in that
mm,
because it's easy, once you start this isn't right, well then this isn't right, and then it starts
mm,
stacking and adding and adding. But then
mm,
when you simplify it like that and you break it down and redirecting that all back to love,
mhm,
eventually that is what is at the core, that is what it is. And I think that's amazing that the way that you describe that I think was really good because it was just very helpful. And I also like how, you bring up having that awareness and how that allows us to have clarity. That's the thing that so many people are searching for, within their emotions, right? Especially if you're having an emotion or a feeling and you don't know why, or you don't understand it, you don't like it, you don't want it to be there. And because that happens all the time. And then your method, I think, is so helpful in being able to navigate that and really face it and process it and feel that feeling rather than pushing
mm,
it and saying we'll do it later, we'll
mhm,
get to you later. But that's what it is. So
yeah,
one of the last things I really want to ask you right here is,
mhm,
what has been the most difficult lesson you have had to learn on your journey so
mhm.
far when it comes to emotional detoxing, and what did it teach you?
That's a good question. The most difficult lesson so far. What did it teach me? I think it's really looking at my part in things. I think when you have to sit and look at how you might have contributed to something, it's so easy to point fingers and say, you did this, you did that, it's your fault. And I realize the reactions, the way that I manage my emotions, really contributed to everything. And I think that that's a difficult thing for people when you realize, wow, I might have co-created this. I know I co-created it, and it's difficult, but at the same time, it just brings in that vulnerability piece that's so important. When we allow ourselves, we don't like to admit that maybe we didn't quite have 100%, or that we had hurt somebody or had done something. And so that's a difficult thing, but it's also really beautiful at the same time.
And I love how you bring up through that and being able to do that has taught
Mhm.
you vulnerability, right? Because of course it's not always
Mm,
easy to say
yeah,
this is why this happened and this is why I'm responsible, or this is
yeah.
my role, or this is my part, because like you
Mm,
said, sometimes easier to say, well, this situation is the way it is because of this event or this
Mm,
person or this thing that happened that I couldn't control. Instead of saying, what, this is eventually, I'm responsible for my reaction to the
mhm,
situation, whether or not I was at fault, not at fault, responsible, not responsible. Being able to say, I am responsible for how I move forward from that happening and
mm,
and reacting to that. I can control my response and reaction to it, even in the moment when we feel like we can't, because it's almost
mm,
instant. Something
mhm,
happens and instantly you're, crying, upset, all these things happening, but
mm.
knowing that you can control the reaction to that and be able to identify your role in that, and instead of dwelling on, well, this is what it is and it's just so bad and such a horrible thing that happened, because of course that's it wasn't a good thing or a good situation always.
Mm,
And like you said, being able to learn vulnerability through that,
mm,
because
mm.
you are saying, this is my part, this is where I am saying, this is where I'm responsible. And that does take courage and it does take bravery sometimes, because not everybody is able to do that, because maybe they haven't done it ever before. So
Yeah. Well, I can give you an example too, because
yeah.
I think it's a tricky one.
Hmm.
It's, on the outside, I looked perfect, honestly. Not yeah, perfect as in I'm not a drinker. I never I don't I'm pretty much, I'm follow the rules, put it that way. It's kind of like that good girl thing, right?
Hmm.
I do the right thing. For the most part, I make the right choices. How my part where was in my head. So what I mean by what I had to recognize how I contributed was the way that I manage my emotions, meaning the the what I said to myself in my mind. And so for me, I'll just use my husband as an example. I could feel something and I didn't like it, right? So sometimes you feel something going on. Maybe you pick up a vibe from somebody, they rub you a wrong way, and you're like, I don't like this feeling in my body. That's what I managed. But the challenge is, I managed it with very nasty thoughts. I
Mm.
didn't say the nasty things because remember, I'm a good girl. I know better. And that's a lot of what we do as women. We follow the rules. Some of us don't, but I'm a pretty good rule follower. But in my head, it was like I was angry. I was resentful. I felt unappreciated. Those kinds of thoughts were going through my mind. And those were there because I was suppressing what I was feeling.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's how I contributed. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I think that's awesome that you clarified that and pointed that out, because I still think that is also a very powerful thing to admit
Mhm.
and also to do and to process yourself. So, yeah, I mean, this whole conversation has just been so good. Has just been so good. You have made my day, and I'm so glad that we got to connect. And whoever the gentleman was that reached out to me telling me about you, I was like, yes. I was
He's
like,
my
I will.
angel. He's an
Yes,
angel.
I was
I have
like,
a lot of
I
angels.
was like, I would love to talk with her. And then, after I got off the phone with you, I was just like, this is awesome. This woman has written these incredible books. You're doing, you're a mother of three daughters, also a professor of psychology. You also, you're doing so many different things. And, I just think it's amazing how, we just got to virtually sit down, have this talk about the cleanse method, talk about emotional detoxing, talk about your story and
Mm,
your experiences, and also to hear, the great tips that you shared with us today about overcoming certain situations, processing emotions, and all of these things. So I just wanted to thank you, Sherianna, for coming on Crooked Illness and sharing
thank
all of
you.
this stuff with me today.
Thank you.
It has
It's been
been,
fun.
yes, so
Yeah.
much fun. Yes, I can't wait to put this episode out there. And you guys, whether you are listening in the daytime, in the nighttime, I hope that you have a great rest of your day. And on that note, I'm going to end it there. So, bye, guys. And also, bye, Sherianna.
Bye bye.